Welcome to Truest Blood, the official True Blood podcast.
I'm Kristin Bauer.
And I'm Deborah Ann Wool.
And you've been invited in.
I wanna do bad things with you. On Truest Blood.
Welcome back to Truest Blood, where we sink our fangs into the series bite by bite. Deb!
We are back, I know, with a new season of Truest Blood. It's going to be so cool.
I mean, we have been watching, and there's a lot going on, kids.
Yeah. This season of Truest Blood, we're going to focus on both seasons 5 and 6 of True Blood. So if you're watching along with us, I mean, buckle up, because we're not even sure where this bus is headed. There's a lot going on.
But we know on the bus we have the most incredible interviews, so.
We do.
Yes.
Luckily, what we get to start off right now, with a bang, or a woof, really, is Joe Manganiello.
Yes!
Werewolf, Sookie Suitor, and so much more. He's here to just melt our hearts into tiny little pieces.
I know. There's nothing about Joe that doesn't melt hearts.
This is true. and probably steel.
Yes, right down to the tiny, cute little dog that he held the entire interview that was half the size of his bicep. That was just perfect.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I just can't tell you. I mean, we love making the show. We want to say thank you to all of you who are back again for more.
Yes.
But first, since this show is insane now and there is so much to remember, let's have a quick bite, season 5 recap style.
Here we go. Setting up the pieces.
We pick up in season 5 without skipping a beat, with Sookie cradling a newly deceased Tara in her arms. When who should stroll in but Pam, looking for Eric. This gives Sookie and Lafayette a wild idea. Pam should make Tara a vampire. Pam, of course, refuses until Sookie promises to use her super snatch to fix what went wrong with Eric and also owe her one. The ritual is successful but unwelcome as Tara takes out all her vampire growing pains on Gran's kitchen before disappearing into the night.
And without Eric, Pam reminisces about her human life as a madam in 1905 San Francisco, which also, coincidentally, is when the whole vampire gang first met. Bill was there, and Lorena was there, and Eric, too.
Wow.
I know. Feeling she had nothing to live for, Pam attempted to end it all, but Eric sires her instead. Perhaps this is why she has a change of heart when Tara also attempts to end her young vampire life and brings her back to Fantasia, where their connection slowly blossoms.
Meanwhile, the all-powerful vampire authority is headquartered in a secret bunker beneath New Orleans.
That's convenient.
It is run by a group of chancellors headed by Roman Zamoyek and his right-hand woman, the notorious Salome. They are staunchly committed to mainstreaming, but there are traitors in their midst, and the growing Sanguinista movement is threatening everything they have worked for. So they hire a new public face to spin for them, none other than vampire Steve Newlin. Love in Louisiana.
The greatest romance of this season is undoubtedly the on-again, off-again love affair between Eric Northman and Bill Compton. After killing Nan Flanagan, they are apprehended by the authority, and even Eric's vampire sister Nora, a chancellor herself, is unable to help them. All three end up behind bars. Nora reveals her true Sanguinista loyalties, while the boys barter with Roman for their lives in exchange for Russell Edgington, who they have learned has escaped his concrete tomb.
Dun, dun, dun.
They are granted a short stay of execution to bring him in.
Returning to Bon Temps, Eric releases Pam to protect her and Tara. He and Bill then seek out Sookie to make use of her fairy powers in their search and find her halfway to bed with Alcide and more than halfway through a bottle of schnapps. Nevertheless, she agrees to help, and she, her lion, Tin Man, and Scarecrow,
You decide which is which.
They track him to an abandoned hospital where he has been recuperating.
Suddenly, a pack of V-addicted werewolves attack, still loyal to Russell. They almost win, too, when the authority arrives, having tracked the bosom buddies to Russell's hideout. They swiftly dispatch of the wolves and, cruelly, the human victims as well. Russell is brought to Roman in chains, but Bill and Eric are heralded as heroes.
Here, bros? Anyone? Anyone? No?
Oh, Deb!
It's bad, but I love it.
Bon Temps and beyond.
Bon Temps is not without its drama in this season either. Shifters and other soups are being hunted by a vigilante hate group under the orders of a mysterious mastermind known as the Dragon.
Whisper Echo.
Heartbroken and angry, Hoyt joins the group, and they kidnap Jessica as a present for him. But when he refuses to kill her, he becomes their enemy number one. Sam and Luna are also targeted by the group, which ends them in the hospital. This convinces Luna to send her werewolf daughter Emma to live with her grandmother to keep her safe.
Andy and Jason are on the case, joined by Sam and Luna skinwalking as Sam. So Sam squared.
Sam squared?
Yep, Always good to have two Sams. They track the hate group down to discover the dragon is none other than Bud Dearborn and his lady love, Sweetie. But the cops and shifters save the day and take them all out. Still, Andy struggles with the pressures of being sheriff and ends up cheating on Holly with a fairy who births 4 fairy babies, leaving them to be raised by their papa.
Now, Lafayette has a demon in him that is starting to put his friends at risk, and the spirit of Jesus appears to guide him back to himself. After a trip to Mexico and escaping from Jesus's brujo uncle once again, he seems to find some closure with his loss, allowing him to fully embrace his medium abilities without the fear of harming others. And a bit of the old Lafayette comes back to life.
Terry's squadron leader Patrick visits because strange fires have been wiping out their old platoon. Turns out they committed some pretty horrendous war crimes, and the spirit of one of the victims cursed the whole unit, who are now systematically dying at the hands of the Ifrit. Lafayette helps them talk to the spirit and learns that one of them must die to atone. When Patrick tries to take out Terry, Arlene turns the tables on him with a waitress's greatest weapon, a well-sharpened pencil.
Oh, yeah.
And Terry breaks the curse by taking out Patrick instead.
Not far off, Alcide is outed as Marcus Bozeman's killer, but wants to remain a lone wolf. Unfortunately, the new packmaster, JD, falls into the same old trap and starts taking V. Alcide realizes he has to save the pack, and with the help of a new girlfriend, his estranged father, and also a little V of his own, he can finally challenge JD and take the pack back to basics. The rise and fall of Russell Edgington.
Back at the Authority, it turns out that Salome was the traitor all along.
What?
She dug up Russell and now betrays Roman for the last time, allowing Russell to stake him in front of all the chancellors. She and Russell and Nora convince the vamps to drink from the ancient vial containing the blood of Lilith, the first true vampire made in God's image. This gets them all wicked high, and they take a bloody victory lap down Bourbon Street.
Eric, swayed by a vision of Godric telling him to save Nora from this insanity, comes to his senses and eventually is able to bring Nora around. But Bill is quickly pulled to the other side, succumbing to the lure of Salome and Lilith. It appears the bromance is over. Bill orders the True Blood factories to be bombed and more new vampires to be made. He even attempts to indoctrinate Jessica, but she escapes to Fantasia, where eventually she and Pam are arrested and brought back to the Authority, this time as prisoners.
Russell and Steve begin a courtship and quickly break rank. They continue their blood bargain with werewolves and even kidnap puppy Emma as a pet. However, Russell is quickly bored with bureaucracy and defects to continue his quest to Daywalk. He glamors Jason to find Sookie at Hot Wings, the sexy fairy club hidden in some weird pocket dimension.
We don't know.
And devours their elder, allowing him access to their world. But before he can make his move, Eric stakes him for the ultimate hero arc, avenging your dead parents.
Harry Potter, Batman, Eric Northman.
Yeah. Stackhouse family secrets.
Jason and Sookie learn some hard truths about their past with the help of their fairy friends, namely that their parents did not die in a car crash but were killed by a vampire named Warlow, attracted to Sookie's fairy blood, and that Sookie was promised to this vampire a century ago by her great-great-granddaddy.
Yikes.
Yikes.
Jason continues to have a rough season between reconciling his feelings for Jessica and his guilt at betraying Hoyt. And it all comes to a head when Hoyt tells them he is leaving Bon Temps for good, moving to Alaska. And he wants Jess to glamour away any memory of her and Jason. She complies, and they tearfully say goodbye to Hoyt Fortenberry.
All this puts Jason in a tailspin, and he starts hallucinating mean, aggressive versions of his parents who encourage him to go all Captain Commando, and once again, he hates all things vampire.
Double yikes.
Yeah. Knocking down the pieces.
Eric, Nora, Tara, Jason, and Sookie sneak into the authority complex and kill a whole bunch of vampires. They rescue Pam and Jessica, resulting in a passionate kiss between Pam and Tara. It was. But Jessica is not so lucky. Confessing her love for Jason, he brushes her aside, saying he could never be with a vampire.
Sam and Luna shift into mice and stow away in Steve Newland's briefcase, gaining access to authority. Luna skinwalks as Steve Newland to rescue Emma and ends up shifting back on live television, revealing the whole Sanguinista plot. Now, you heard it here. Luna for MVP of this season.
It was unbelievable. Meanwhile, Lilith appears to each chancellor, telling them to drink all of her blood. Bill feels the call and kills the others before they can take his glory. But knowing Salome is older, he pretends to believe she is the chosen one and tricks her into drinking tainted blood, allowing him to have his villain monologue and eventually stake her.
When Eric and Sookie return to get Bill, he is utterly unaffected by their pleas. He downs the vial of Lilith blood and explodes. However, as Sookie sobs in Eric's arms, the blood reforms and the mighty Billith is born.
Joe Manganiello is not only a hunk of a man, he is also a producer, writer, director, and entrepreneur. He authored the popular book published by Simon & Schuster called Evolution, with a foreword by Schwarzenegger.
Whoa! He played Alcide Herveaux for 5 seasons on True Blood and was voted the favorite pop culture werewolf of all time, Kristin. All time.
That's amazing.
By the readers of Entertainment Weekly magazine, as well as a number of other fan favorite awards. He is directing and producing the first ever documentary on the history of Dungeons and Dragons, for which he interviewed yours truly, to be released in 2024.
I know, 2 D&D people in the house. Joe is a master of many trades who keeps evolving and entertaining us all. Joe Manganiello!
Hi, Kristin. Hi, Deborah.
OMG.
Welcome. We've been waiting so long to have you on. This is such a treat.
Feels like
for
we've been
us.
trying to do this forever, so I'm so glad here we are. Yeah, it worked out.
I know. Well, you're a busy man. And we, though, have been watching you on screen, right? So Deb and I are now watching the show at least one time through, if not 5. So we feel like we've been seeing you. And also, I just internet stalked you to prepare for this interview, which I have to do with everybody.
Okay.
And I can't even believe all the pies you have your fingers in and everything you have accomplished and are doing and are continuing to do. So we have so many questions. And Deb, why don't you kick it off, because you're the acting nerd.
I am the acting nerd. I'm the resident acting nerd. Well, let's start off with the question we actually like to ask everyone. And I'm particularly interested from you, since you came into the show a few seasons on, which is, how did you get the job? And what was that experience like coming into the show?
Man, okay. So how did I get this job? Well, how I got the job is like, if you were to argue with an atheist that there is a God, then you can use my getting cast as proof. So I had a friend of mine.
That is the lead up to a story. Here we go.
I'll explain. So I had a friend of mine who sent me, mind you, this is, how many years ago are we talking? We're talking 14 years ago. 14 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? So 14 years ago, like, the internet really, and social media, it wasn't the way it is now. You know, like, we take it for granted, but like, there was some blog that was obsessed with, you know, HBO's True Blood. And on this blog, they said, it's based on a series of novels, and in the 3rd book, the werewolves show up. And there's this one character, and he's going to show up, and he's a fan favorite, and all the fans of the novels love this character. And they started fan casting who they thought should be that character. And so my friend sent me a link and said, you gotta check this out. There were people posting pictures of me because I was on the show One Tree Hill at the time. So fans were saying he should play the
right.
werewolf. And at the time
Right,
I
right.
had I was working construction in LA to pay the bills, in between
No.
gigs, and I had long hair and I grew a beard because I was working construction and nobody cared. You didn't have to like,
You were
well, I
Alcide.
just was
You
like,
were living the Alcide
the hell
life.
with it. I'm gonna look like a lumberjack while I'm doing this job,
Yeah.
because nobody's paying attention, nobody
Yeah.
cares, like nobody's hiring me. I was no pilot seasons were coming and going, nobody cared.
Mm.
Everybody was going British or Australian, like they didn't want
Mm.
me, and
Mhm.
so I was like, the hell with it. I'm shoveling sand and gravel from 7 to 4 every day, jackhammering, like, and I just grew my hair out, grew this beard, the whole thing. So pictures of me looking like that started showing up on this blog site, like this guy should play the werewolf
Oh
when he
my
shows up. And
gosh.
so my friend sent me that. I go, oh wow, that's interesting, So I doubled back, watched the show from the beginning, started watching the show. There were 2 seasons now. I started watching the two
Yeah.
seasons. I even got the books and started looking at the books. And I got the third book and was like, oh, Suki opens the door and looks up and has to look up again. And so I'm like,
Ah.
oh, okay, well, I got that covered. And
Yeah.
And Joe, this is all before you even have a casting call or
before,
anything. This is just pure
so, yeah,
interest.
so I call my agents and I'm like,
Okay.
hey, and I send them the link. I go, look at this. I go, can you get me an audition or get me, tell casting so they did.
Yeah.
And they were like, hey, casting, they're very much into Australian men.
Ah.
Ugh.
Because at this
Oh.
time, it's weird. Things went in waves. And at that time, like
Yeah.
masculine men were being outsourced to Australia because there was a thought that American men weren't manly enough and that American
Oh,
actors
no.
weren't well trained enough like the Brits. So it was like it was either
Ah,
British
right.
or it was Australian, depending. And on this one, they were like,
Huh.
yeah, they think they're going Australian or whatever it was. And they,
Yeah.
so there was like no feedback coming back. It was just like crickets. Now, there's a guy that I met around town. And I didn't really know this guy very well, but I had met him through mutual friends. And as the story goes, he had breakfast with Junie Lowry, who's one of the
Mm.
casting directors. And they were out at breakfast one day, and the waiter came over and poured their water or whatever. And Junie said, God, that guy would be if only he was an actor, that guy would make a great werewolf. And this guy who I kind of knew peripherally said, no, you know who'd make a great werewolf? This guy.
Oh my
And
gosh.
pulled up those long hair pictures of me with the beard and said, this
No.
guy. And she goes, oh, is he an actor? He goes, yeah. I know him. And so then I guess Junie then went back to the office and someone else mentioned my name in the office. And she said, well, I guess
Oh
somebody mentioned
my
him twice
gosh.
in one day. Let's bring him in. And that's how it happened. So it was like complete total
Wow.
providence, lucky, like it got
Yeah.
repeated and she went, okay, this must be a sign, I'll bring him in.
Wow.
So the first werewolf that was up, because like I don't show up until the third episode of the third season, but
Mhm.
the other
Mhm.
werewolves do. There's the bad guy werewolves who are
Right.
working for Russell. It's
Right.
Cooter and the gang.
Right.
And so they sent me the sides for Cooter. You know how it is. It's like sometimes you audition and you're like, man, I crushed that. Like that was unbelievable.
Mhm.
But you're so self-aware of your own performance that you didn't crush it. You were bad.
Mhm.
And there's sometimes
Yeah.
when you have a
Sure.
bad audition, you're like, man, I was horrible. You throw the script in the trash on the way out and the phone rings and they're like, you
Yes.
were the best all day. They want you to come back in. You're like, shit,
Yeah.
I
Totally.
need new script, I need new sides. When I went in for Cooter, it was like I was channeling the God of Thunder. It was like I don't. It was like the force of a thousand years of history. It was like flowing. It was like I
Oh
was
my
just
God.
on. It was like, and I came in to play Cooter, which is really fun because they're drinking Bill's blood in
Yeah.
the back seat, and they're
Yeah.
crazy and licking his blood and everything else, licking and doing all the crazy. And
I can see the
yeah,
audition
I was
now.
like,
It was
why?
great.
It was like
You still got
I
it.
couldn't wait. It was like letting an animal out of a cage, at that audition. But it was like 12 people. I mean, it was Alan, it was the whole writer's room, it was all the producers, it was
Right.
Junie. And I'm reading with Libby. And for people that don't know, Libby Goldstein is
The greatest.
4'11", maybe. made
Yeah.
with a thick Long Island. So she's
Oh,
going,
yeah,
oh
thick.
my God, he's a werewolf. And I have to, stay in the scene and respond to her. Now, Libby also did something that like I have never experienced before or after, and it could have completely thrown everything off. She went right from the first scene directly into the second scene without a pause or a break.
Oh. Yeah, that's bizarre.
Right? So two different scenarios,
Unusual.
no reset, no nothing. She just went into the next line in the second scene. But I was so like in the pocket that it didn't matter. And I just like went right into it. I just went right in. She hit me the ping pong ball and I was, and so I did these two scenes and then there's like a pause and the room is like silent, but I can feel that energy of like that, and I just get up and walk out and then close the door.
Good for you. Good for you.
And as soon as the door closes, I just hear like the room started screaming and yelling.
No.
Yeah. And so apparently Alan said later on, he said, after you came in that first time for Cooter, we took your picture and I stuck it on the bulletin board and it stayed right there.
Wow.
And they called
Yeah.
back and they said, oh, we narrowed it down. We want to bring him back in for Cooter. And I'm like, okay. So I go back in for Cooter. This time it's a smaller group of guys. And I go in and read for Cooter. Same thing. Great. And they called my agents later that day and said, he's not getting Cooter. He's not getting this part. But there's another part for the romantic werewolf, the romantic hero werewolf who comes up later. We want him to screen test with Anna Paquin, but she's out of town.
Okay.
Right. So this is December. So they're like, well, when's she going to be back? And they're like, in a month. And
So you sat on it?
well, here's what happened. So, and again, you can use this to argue with the atheists, but I was on a show called One Tree Hill for 2 years prior to that. I played a recurring character on One Tree Hill, and I was going to be made a series regular, but the writer's strike happened in 08, so it didn't happen. So I'm thinking about maybe I have to go back to New York. Maybe I need to like get out of LA. Like it's not happening. And then this True Blood thing, all of a sudden, it comes out of like left field. It was like when I was ready to leave, thinking like I shouldn't be here anymore. This is it. It's not working out. I'm running out of money. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, I need to give this up. Like, I need to rethink this whole thing. This starts happening. And they're like, well, we want you to, screen test with Anna. And she's not going to be here for a month. The next day, One Tree Hill calls and wants to make me a series regular.
Wow.
Like, where were you guys? But again, it was the exact right moment. If they would have called 2 weeks before, life goes differently.
That's where you'd be.
So
Interesting.
we then go back to True Blood, and my people are like, hey, he's got this offer to be a series regular. We don't have forever to give them an answer. You need to hurry up. So if Anna's not there, what do you want to do? And they said, all right. So they hurried up and wrote the third episode so that they could give me that material. And I went back in and just read by myself with casting. And I read it, with them and left. And I was pulling into my driveway at home and the phone rang and it was my agent. And he said, hey, the agent's assistant was like, hey, we have your agent and your manager on the phone, which means that they're both on the phone.
Yeah, that's good.
It's good or it's terrible.
And
My manager calls alone to tell me bad news. When it's both of them, I'm like, oh my God, it's still in play. Something's happening.
Yeah. And so you have that sense. And I just pulled into my driveway. So I put it in park and just sat. And they were like, you got it. And it was like,
oh, that's such a moment.
like, that's it, like that's it. And I mean, we're never going back to the construction truck, all that, I don't have to move. Like, like this thing can happen.
Yeah.
So I called my mother to tell her I got this part that I think is going to change my life. And then the next call was to my rock star friend to get Hugh Jackman's trainer's number.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
And
sounds
yeah,
like
yeah.
the proper order for a nice man.
For True Blood, mom
Yeah.
trainer, mom rock star
Mom
trainer.
and then a
Yeah, yeah,
trainer.
yeah.
Mom, I love you. I got good news and I got to go because I got to start getting ready to prepare for
Yeah.
this. Like you knew it was a moment before you even got the audition. That synchronicity, I mean, I think it would even give an atheist pause.
You know,
Right? For me, it would, but I'm one of those,
Little woo woo.
molder.
no, listen, I am too, and but I would say that at that time I was a bit of a cynic, but I remember. I mean, I'm fast forwarding a little bit, but I remember in the final Comic-Con before Alan left the show, we're in the bathroom together, we're both in the bathroom at the same time, and I just said, Alan, I want to thank you so much. This job changed my life forever, and that's because of you. And he said to me in very like kind of like I don't know humble fashion. He just said, Joe, there just wasn't anybody else.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Well, as the skeptic, as the Scully of the of the
pair,
duo
yeah.
here, I will jump in and say, all of that providence too. But I will say the thread that we see in every audition story that gets shown or gets told on this podcast is that everyone brought it. Right? No one came in there and just was charismatic or did a little thing. Everyone came with a perspective and a point of view and some fire. And whether they did a great performance or not so great, whatever it was, they came with that heart. And I think that's what I will give not only the actors, but Alan and everyone who was casting and putting the show together, Junie and Libby, credit for is choosing people who came to play, who weren't just abs and charisma. They actually had something to say and
no, but that show, yes, and the show is deceptively tricky, and the whole show was populated by theater actors.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, like, believe me, after the show came out, I mean, I remember sitting in the makeup trailer and Anna Paquin saying to me, "Did you grow up on a farm?" I'm like, "No, the suburbs." Like, no, I went to like 90210 high school. But people thought I was this like blue collar, dude who loves having his shirt off, kind of farmer or something. Like that's what people thought, and it's like, no, I'm a classically trained theater actor from the Carnegie Mellon School of Drama. Mike McMillan, who played the Reverend Steve Newland, Carnegie Mellon. You've got,
Nelson,
Regina and Nelson were Juilliard.
Yep.
You had some North Carolina School for the Arts. Dennis O'Hare, multiple Tony winner, was Northwestern.
Yep.
You have Fiona Shaw, who's like West End of London. Like you had this international cast of like heavyweight theater actors. Pretending we're witches and vampires and werewolves and fairies. That's what made it so fun, was that everyone was so qualified.
Now, what's interesting is that, Joe, it said online, you played football and then you suffered injuries, and that helped you turn towards acting. You went to Carnegie, and then this is just an incredible. What I'm seeing here, what I'm pulling the thread on, is the persistence, because it says you auditioned for Carnegie during your senior year. You weren't accepted, so you went to University of Pittsburgh, worked tirelessly the next year in theater, and then reapplied to Carnegie Mellon, and you were awarded a scholarship as one of only 17 students accepted. And I'm crying because like that sort of tenacity is so, I mean, that's that heart that Deb is referring to that everybody brings to this show, True Blood.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I want to back up a second. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, but I knew that pursuing them professionally was not going to be my goal. Like it just wasn't
Okay.
like I from the time I was a kid was an artist. Like I always say, like
Mm.
if I had any say or I could go back in time, I would have enrolled me at 3 years old in Sarah Lawrence. You know, I would have like
Yeah.
create
Yeah.
your own curriculum, Joe, because we're reading Tolkien. You know, we're into Joseph
Right.
Campbell. Like I was just like I was
Yes.
reading Stephen King's whole library when I was 9. Like I was just that kind of a weird artistic kid. I mean, as Deb knows, I was game mastering lots of tabletop role playing games for my friends at 9, 10, 11 years old. You know, who does that? You're a total weirdo. Um, but I was also this, but I
Hey.
was also this, you know, head and shoulders bigger than all the other kids athlete. I was always the
Yeah.
captain of every team. So there was a pull, you know, and I think when you're that age and you're not looking, nobody's looking at the arts as a career.
No.
And so you know, the knee injury, it wasn't like the knee injury and then all of a sudden it's like I'm going to become
Mm-hmm.
this artist. It was knee injury and let's stop and think about this for a second. What are we
Mm-hmm.
doing? We're 16 years old. We got 2 years left. You know, what do you want to do? I know I'm supposed to be an artist. I knew college football is not going to be it. Let me free that time up and let me free up, you know, and start figuring this out. And sure enough, my senior year, I took theater classes, but I had to be in freshman theater classes as a senior. So
Oh,
Okay.
imagine day one for the freshmen, ninth grade. Like we're finally here, everybody, and we're in theater class together. It's gonna be incredible. And in
an
rolls
8-foot senior.
the big 8 foot senior with his Letterman jacket on, with all the pins and everything, and sits down, and it's like, what is going on?
Yeah. And then he's good.
Well, that was the thing. The theater teacher was like, "What are you doing here?" You know, she pulled me after school. She's like, "What are you trying to get an easy A? Is
Oh,
that it? You know,
really?
just trying to get an easy A, you know?" And I said,
Oh.
"No." I said, I think I can do this." Like, and she goes, "What do you
Yeah.
mean? As a job?" I go, I think I have it in me. I think I can do this." And she was like,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
"Okay." And then 2 weeks later, you know, could you wait after school, after class, please? Yeah, okay. Um, the tryouts for the High School Musical are this week, and I'd like for you to try it. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what is
Ah.
it? She's like, it's Oklahoma.
Oh
I'm
my
like,
gosh.
it's a musical? She's like, yeah. I'm like, I have to sing and dance? And she's like, just sing happy birthday. And you're
Mhm.
athletic and you'll figure it out.
Have rhythm, yeah.
Okay. So I went and I did it. And then I forgot all about it. And, you know, however, like a month later or whatever it was, I'm walking down the hall in school and kid after kid is like, "Hey, Joe, congratulations." Kids that I didn't really hang out with either. You know what I mean? They're like, "Hey, man,
Yeah.
congratulations." I'm like, "Wait, hold on. No, wait, wait, come here. What happened?" And they're like, "Oh, you got cast as one of the leads in the musical." And I'm like, "Shut up." So I went and I looked at the cast list outside the theater and was like, oh man, because you have to understand, I started as a freshman on the varsity volleyball team. I started all 4 years. I made the junior Olympic team when I was 16, and there were
Wow.
colleges looking at me, and I was the captain, and that was my spring sport when the musical was. So I had to make that decision.
Right.
Are we done? And
Yeah.
yeah, I was done. I didn't show up. And everybody told me
Wow.
what an idiot I was. My high school
Wow.
linebacker coach was like, pulled me aside in the hallway and was like, "You're an idiot. Like, who do you think you are? Like, you're making a mistake." And
Oh,
the volleyball teacher, who we had a new volleyball coach, and she like went off on me and went off to all these other
wow.
people. And it was like a scandal that I wasn't I was doing the musical. Like, what is he doing?
So this is fantastic because this actually segues me into something I want to ask you about
Mhm.
Alcide, which is male expectation, right? This idea of packmaster versus a romantic versus, these kinds of
Yeah,
themes that go through Alcide's life. And then this relationship with your father, which is this incredible storyline that sort of sneaks in on us later
yeah,
on. And, I love this idea. You're talking about expectations of you because of how you looked or, the types of things you could do, and subverting that. And it was so interesting to watch Alcide go on his own journey of that, I think.
Yeah, well, you're nailing something that at least I realized about the show, which is the show
Mm.
works as myth, as metaphor for
Mm.
something greater. We're using these mythological creatures to talk about what was going on in the world. Like, people have to understand there was no gay marriage at the time.
Yeah.
So vampires marrying humans, or vampire marriage being passed in the Senate or, in Congress that was Alan's way of talking about the ridiculousness of the culture that we were living in. And the show, everybody had the sense that the show was really helping that conversation happen.
Mm.
Um, you talk about vampires wanting their rights and what those rights were going to be. And the show
Mhm.
takes place in the South. Oh, hi, we're using mythological characters to talk about who we are as people, and we're making, it's the spoonful of sugar that helps that subversive
Yeah.
message go down. And so when it came my turn to step into, what are werewolves really, and what are werewolves for me, it was like, well, you know, inside of every man is something 200,000 years old. And as much as we change or culture changes, there's something about that that's never going to change. Like, there's something about that hunter Fight Club kind of hit it right on the head, which is like, we have a want to protect. We have a want to create pecking order. We have a want to compete, control, conquer. And where does that go in a society where we have to push that down? When you can go to the grocery store to buy your food, well, what do we need men for? We don't need to go out there and hunt things down. So there's a uselessness, and it's like your khaki pants and your nice coffee table aren't going to take away that impulse. So for me, werewolves were that, except pushed down. And so then it becomes even magnified, because you look at all the werewolves, they're all Australians. They're all bikers. They're all like kind of living on the fringe and freedom, man. We're not living within the confines of society. Well, you take this one werewolf who, kind of like Bill Compton in a certain way, is he's ashamed at who he is. He's ashamed of the people that he's surrounded by, that he has to associate with. He's ashamed of like what people think of him if he were to open up to them, and he feels isolated because of it, which then creates this like perfect like romance with Suki, or potential
Yeah.
romance, because she's different like him. She's a weirdo like him with a secret, but she's not some base, low class, like uncouth person like Debbie or like the werewolves were. So she's like maybe his way out, or maybe his way to actually sharing something with somebody, or maybe coming around to wanting to have a child.
Right.
And so for me, it was like, okay, like I'm in, like, let's go. I've got the metaphor. I understand. Like I'm the monster. I'm the beast. And going back to kind of the way that I got into acting, like I got into acting at the last possible moment for me. I was a jock. I was a sports captain, but on the inside, I was this empathetic artist who was thinking about why people were the way that they were. I was very sensitive. But I also, I had this big aggressive, side, obviously. So to me, getting into drama school, I was in Carnegie Mellon with a bunch of kids that were doing ballet when they were 5. And I was this
Right.
big 6'5" jockey kind of guy who had a lot of life experiences and really got in at the last possible moment. So, when I played Tybalt, it was different. When I played Richard III, Richard III was a fighter. He had a sword. So
Right.
it came out differently when I played Stanley Kowalski, well, I have to talk about Napoleon and Napoleon complex. I mean, that's a little, all right, well, whatever. But like,
Different podcast.
but it comes off scary in a different way. So I got to play these characters in a different way. And so when I found Alcide, it was like, oh my God, there's so much of me that I could pour into him because he was this big, romantic, empathic, sensitive, but protective and vicious.
Yeah.
If you came after something he loved or him, like, and I got to really, push all that through and out of me, and it was like a really beautiful thing. Like I love Alcide. Like I want to hug him. I just love him so much. I love that. I love that character so much.
You and 20 million other people.
Oh, we had some interesting fans along the way. We sure did.
Well, I have another True Blood question before, Kristin, if you want to, pull us back around with a personal one. But we had talked about, it's an adult show. It's sexy. We know all of those things. But you had one of the longest brewing lead up to romance with Sookie, I think, of the series. And it took several seasons for that to really come to fruition. And so I'm curious, on a show that is in your face provocative and you're playing the somewhat more restrained arc, how do you do that? And what do you do to keep that fresh and interesting and the chemistry alive?
Well, as you were saying that, it made me think, during my first season, there's a scene, I think it might be in episode 8, where I'm on Sookie's porch and I have to go back to Jackson. And I have to say goodbye to her after, all the stuff we've been through. And I'm like, hey, I got to go back. Cooters and Debbie, they burnt down my sister Janice's hair salon. I have to say goodbye to Sookie, and I got to go back. And so I'm saying goodbye. And look, I was signed during that first season. Again, I was signed as a guest star. I wasn't a regular. Everybody else was a regular around me. And for whatever reason, I got signed to the guest star contract. So, I just want to let all the actors out there know, like, I was living off of my savings for that season, hoping it all amounted to something,
You're paying Hugh Jackman's trainer out of your own pocket. Yeah.
Totally. And you're hoping this is going to go somewhere. You're hoping it's going to happen. But like after agent, manager, taxes, it's not a lot. And I did know this. I'm going to be around on this show as long as I am a viable love interest for number 1 on the call sheet. Okay. So if I'm in scenes with Anna, and there's definitely like, why am I not injecting this show with romance? Like, why am I not? And especially like when I kind of did the mathematical proof and realized that like who Alcide was on the inside was such a good but odd match with who Sookie was on the inside. And also like I'm the one who can go out in the day. I can go out in the sun. Like, and he has a good heart, where I think the vampires never knew where they were coming from. And so I just thought, man, if he can get out of his own way and she can get out of her own heartbreak and the two of them can kind of get to this place, that's a good couple. And I'd even talked to Charlene Harris, and Charlene was like, oh, the werewolf. Yeah, honey. Like she was all about it too.
She's team Alcide.
Which I think she said something like, she was like, who wants to put their feet over in the bed and feel cold feet?
That's she's the best. And not wrong.
She's not wrong. And so, when I get to this place where I've got to say goodbye to Sookie, I really made it seem like in another lifetime I have to go through this thing, but if I can ever get back to this place with you and I, there's something here. And if I think the lines were like, if we weren't so stupid. And I just thought, like, man, this is like a country song. This is great. This is so, and it's so like, you love saying those words. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, they wrote it so romantic. So I get done with the first take. You know, we're Sookie and I, we hug, and I walk down off the steps and leave, get in the truck. And
Mhm.
Rael, and it might have been, I forget who was directing that episode, but it was like, they were like, you know, Rael came over and was like, hey, so your relationship with Sookie, it's like brother sister.
Huh.
You're like, you know, you're like friends. You're like friends. It's like friends. And I was like, okay, yeah, all right. You know, and I'm just doing one of those, like,
Really?
Okay, yeah, all right, okay, I hear you. And she's like, so just, you know, try it like that. And I was like, okay, sure. So, you know, I kind of do a little walk in a circle, like we actors do. You know, you're kind of like,
Or wolves, maybe.
let me just try. I'm trying this outfit on. And no, I don't. There's no way. There's just no way.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Yeah.
And so I go back in. We do the next take, and I like even more romantic. Like,
Good for you.
even more. And Anna kind of sees what I'm doing too, and she's going along with it.
Great.
And cut. Rael comes back over. Hey, so friends, brother, sister, friends. We're friends. We're friends. We're just friendly. And I'm like, right. Sorry. Yep. Okay, cool. Got it. And I do it again my way. Cut. Come back over. Hey. So now we have the script, and you should get the script. She's like, right, you know, this is friends, buddies, hey. And I'm just, okay, yep. I do it again, same way. I feel like I'm being completely insubordinate, but like, I can't do what you're asking me to do. I can't, every fiber, every molecule, I can't. I did 5 takes that way, increasingly romantic every time. And I get done and I walk over to video, and I played dumb the whole time because, like,
Right.
I don't know, when you look the way that I look, you can play dumb and get away with it. So, or as the Italians say, you're not dumb, Joe. You're just large. So anyway, so I played dumb, and then after the 5th take was done, we were done. They called the day, and I knew we were done, and I dropped the dumb thing, and I came over to Video Village, and I just stood there and kind of, you know, licked my lips and looked at Rael, and she went, "Fuck, we're in trouble. We're in trouble." She says, "The fans are gonna want to see Sookie with you, and I don't know what we're gonna do." And I went, yeah. And so, sure enough, that's what happened. And I was made a regular over that summer. Right after my first episode aired, the fans went crazy, and they called and said, we want to make him a regular now. And so that summer, we were working out my contract. And then season 4, I wind up on the poster. So it was like, you know, like, whoa, you know, and at that point too, like, that gut instinct, that feeling that I had, I went with it. I knew it. And it led to that job that then paid my bills. And I never had to go back to that construction truck. After having no pilot season for years and nobody wanting me, I backdoored onto this show. And the next pilot season, all of these pilots were like looking for a Joe Manganiello type. And it was like, oh, really? Where were you last year when I was broke?
Right. When you could have had Joe Manganiello.
So, you know, it was so interesting the way that it went. Like, I was lonely. I felt like I was wrong. I felt like what was right about me. And as a result, you know, I wound up getting invited to be a part of the show permanently. And, you know, it did, like you said, it did take a few years for us to wind up together. But, like, you know, you were talking about Mulder and Scully. It's like, you don't want them to kiss.
Yeah.
You got to straighten that out. You got to, like, have these magnets trying to get back together, and circumstances aren't right. And of course, you know, spoiler, like, we get together and then they blow my head off, which was our first scene together. Deborah,
I know, our first time we ever worked together. That story is so interesting to me because I think it's such an interesting conversation about the collaboration between writing and acting and directing within this film medium, and that it is tricky and it requires this give and take. And writers, sit in a room and they create these complex, amazing stories. It's this incredible dialogue for us to say. I mean, you said you loved the dialogue in that scene. You were so excited about it. But at a certain point, you have to say, hey, we're in this together. And I may now know some things about Alcide that are real and true because I am him. And I want that to be part of this story. And I think one thing I give the True Blood writers credit for is that in the long run, they really did see us and start to incorporate who we were and what our strengths were into these stories. And I think that's a really key example of where there was some resistance. You were figuring it out, but in the long run, it ended up being what was right for the show.
Well, and that's what's interesting is that we're all coming from different places as storytellers, and a writer's coming from their place, and we as actors have agency on the ground. And sometimes, you're working with a director who's coming on to a show and you've been on it for 4 years, and they're giving you a note or, some way that they think it should go. And you're like, man, if I do what you say, it's my face. I'm the one. And they're going to think that I made this choice and that was my decision. And sometimes, as uncomfortable as it, listen, that was an uncomfortable afternoon of work.
I imagine.
It was like, you're it was like everybody was coming out from the tent, like circling around me, trying to get me to play it a certain way. And I was like, and I just thought the easiest way out of this is going to be playing dumb, where you're like, oh, right. Yeah. Sorry. I made my choices. I'm like locked in. Oh God. Yeah, you're right. And then like, forget it. Just do it again, like do it again your way. And, because also for me, and I don't know how you are, but like I was also at that time coming from a place where I had seen so many romantic comedies where there was the obvious right choice for her and then some idiot jerk over here that why would you ever be with that person in a million years? And I'm sorry, but me personally, I think it's dumb and I think it's lazy and I think it's like who cares? It's so like trite and I'm not invested. If she has to make a tough decision between two people that might be right for her in different directions, oh man, now I'm like, who's she gonna pick? I thought the intelligence of the audience, I thought the intelligence of the material, like there should be an argument that she should be with this guy. And I think that then adds another layer to the show and makes it more interesting moving on, because I had seen it fail so many times and I had been asked to do that so many times, to be okay, you're going to be the douchebag guy that, rolls up on a motorcycle who's like an idiot when she should clearly choose the other guy. And I've kind of made a career of not playing the douchebag like a douchebag, and in this moment it was like, why wouldn't he this red-blooded werewolfy guy who keeps undressing in front of her all the time? Like, why wouldn't he want to be with her? Why wouldn't he want to give that a shot, or why wouldn't he see where that goes? And also, like, listen, let's just call it what it is. Like, this show is a romance. It's based on like summer romance novels. So when you really look at the source material, you're like, oh, come on, let's go, buddy. Like this is what we're paying you to do. Let's go. That's what I thought. It's like, well, you don't want me to use that? Like, come on now. Oh, I'm in the friend zone? Yeah, right. Get out of here, So, and it led to me being on the show for 5 years, So, I definitely felt validated. But Rael, if you're out there and you're watching this, like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. But you know what I mean? Like, I had to do what I knew I had to do it as a storyteller.
Well, who knows what she was answering to? They may have had plans figured out based on something else they had to answer to, and now she's got to figure out this is a good problem to have in a way. Now we have to figure it out how to incorporate this, and we're gonna have to get some extra pages.
Well, listen, I mean, here's the other thing too. those table reads on that show turned into like, I mean, it was like Ben-Hur at
It
points where there were like
was.
88 people on the
Yeah.
cast sheet, 88 people at a table read. Like all of that costs money.
Yeah.
So when you've got this guy signed as the guest star and everybody else is a regular, and he's doing series regular things,
Mhm.
there might be like some sort of financial decision coming down the
Yes.
high that's like, hey, we don't have the budget to do this romance.
Right.
So don't, you know what I mean? Like you
Right.
just, you never know.
Right.
But again, it's like as an actor, and I want to say this in the most positive way because it is a team sport.
Mhm.
And what I was doing was what I thought was right for the story.
Mhm.
I just thought this is right for the, I mean, obviously there's selfish, considerations that like, but like, I think this is going to make the story more interesting. And I was coming from a good place when it came to that. And I look at that scene now and I'm like, ooh, it's like I love that scene. It's like, God,
Mhm.
like I love it, so
Mhm.
I'm proud of it.
Well,
Very
and there's
proud of it.
something as an actor, you're not the author, but you need to have authority. You have to have some ownership over your choices and be able to back those up and say,
Mhm.
this is where I'm coming from and I believe in it. And so, being given a note that you ultimately don't believe in isn't going to serve anyone. It's not going to serve the story or your performance or the audience.
And the show.
Yeah.
Well, it's an amazing story of heart all the way through, Joe. And talent and hard work and showing up over and over and over again. And
Persistence, like you said, Kristin.
huge persistence. And we have a question that we ask everyone. And this is, if you think of your experience on the show, could you pick 3 words that come to mind that reflect your experience?
3 words that reflect my experience on True Blood. I mean, the first word would be break. I mean, it broke me out.
Yeah.
And led to all kinds of things.
Yep.
And I'm still here. I'm still kicking. 2, pride. I'm proud. I'm proud of being a part of that ensemble. I to be a part of a cast like that, a crew like that. I remember
Yeah.
somebody along the way saying, soak it up because it's never going to be this good again. To be on an HBO show during the golden age of
Yeah,
television,
yeah.
the golden age of cable that changed everything. Like movies sucked compared to what HBO was doing at that time. Like I remember going to the movies and being
Mhm.
disappointed during that era because what was the real storytelling, the real acting, the real
Yes.
chances were being taken on
Yes.
cable. So I would say pride. I was so proud to be a part of that. It's so validating in a way to have been,
Yes.
an HBO actor, with everybody I got
Very
to
much.
act with,
Yes.
it was so good on that show. My God. And the last word I'm gonna say is sadness. I'm sad that I didn't get to play the character more. I'm sad that I didn't get to do more with Robert Patrick.
Mhm.
I'm sad I didn't get to do more with Chloe.
Mhm.
I was so sad to say goodbye to Alcide. The show wasn't about the werewolf in the end. It was, you know what I mean? It was about Sookie and the vampires, and they had to close up the A plot and the B plot. And I understand. And
Yes.
to a certain degree, like I just had to accept that I had to get out of the way for that, And you really
Okay.
can't have me floating around at the end. So I understand you got to get rid of me because if I'm around, like Rael said, people are going to want to see me with her. So it's like you got to clear the,
Well,
you got to get.
But part of them too, like there's your collaboration, tit for tat there at the end. You understand a story
Yeah.
and what needs to happen for this one.
I
So
know.
it was a little
I
both.
gotta go,
Yeah.
but it was a bit like euthanizing my favorite character of all time. It was like holding,
for
it
all
was
of
like
us.
me holding him, and saying
Yeah.
goodbye. So,
So hard.
so I get sad sometimes when I think about it because I just, you get a role like that in a group like we were in, and it was really like they were right. You know, it's never going to be better than this, and they were right in many, many, many ways. And so, you know, it's it was I you know I like there is a sadness when I look back on it, because I just I wish I could do it all over again. You know, I
I
really
know.
do. I really do. And not because I wish I would have done things differently. I just wish I could live it all again. I wish I could live it all.
Yeah.
It was such a magical time, and a magical show. And it changed the landscape of things. We weren't treated like actors. We were treated like
Right.
rock stars. Like we were rolling stuff. Comic-Con, 6,000 screaming, like grabbing at you, trying to
I
pull your jacket
know.
out, it was like, it was crazy.
It was crazy.
To be a part of something that people feel so strongly about and love so deeply
Yes.
is like,
Yes.
man, like projects come and go. I've done a million things that came and went with a blip, but True Blood was like, there was mania. It was mania. And I wish every actor could feel that, because I think there's a lot of people that get into acting or move to LA because they want to feel that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and a lot of them that don't get it can kind of never move on to the next room of life.
Yes.
And I got to experience that, and really, and it's like, hey man, you know, I'm good. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm okay,
Mhm.
because I
Yeah.
actually I got to be a part of something that was that the love, you know.
And we've heard that from so many people. You know, everybody has expressed that sentiment from behind the camera, in front of the camera. And you have really, you're continuing to write and produce and direct and create products in the world. And you've got a book, and you're just doing so many things that you've always done, and also still acting. So, and I don't know that any of us will ever have what we had on that show again. So
No.
we're so lucky. And also it's sad when something that special ends, you know, but we're lucky, but we're sad, but we're lucky.
Yeah. But I also deep down, and this is a funny feeling, it's kind of like that feeling I had before I got on the show, or as I was in the process of, but I feel like there's another werewolf in me somewhere. I'm always looking for the right script, the right story, because
Okay.
I really do think that,
Interesting.
like, you know, if Clint Eastwood gets to do The Unforgiven and kind of put the cap
Yeah.
on the cowboy genre for him,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
then there's something. There's gonna be something, and I'm not.
Well, you've been right about everything so far. Your instincts have always, your wolf instincts have always been spot on.
But also, I also get to be the pack leader at home now.
Yes.
I was going to say, the audience
We have
doesn't know
bubbles.
what we're looking at. We're looking at Joe. We're looking at kind of in this little icon I have on this little screenshot I have on my computer, which is like Joe Manganiello, tattooed, black t-shirt, this amazing art behind him, and holding the entire time this sweet dog that's like the size of his bicep. I mean, this is all of Joe that we're right here looking at. Look
Yeah.
at sweet Bubbles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I modeled Alcide after a Yorkie.
You did?
Yeah.
There's a scoop, ladies and gentlemen.
Because, well, so Yorkies, like, they think they're the boss.
Yeah.
No matter what, who's bigger, who's not, like they jump, like they attack. They
Yeah.
attack first.
Yeah.
And I just thought, like, that kind of spirit is like, you can't help but love something like that, you know? So I just thought, well,
Totally.
if Alcide has no impulse control, and if you mess with somebody who he loves, he's gonna come at you.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Joe, so much. This has been just a pleasure and so insightful.
Such a
and
pleasure.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks for doing this, and thanks for keeping the lighthouse lit.
Hey.
You know, it's so great to see you both.
the wonderful thing about Joe is he's so surprising in so many ways. I think, yes, because he has that physique and that presence, it is so interesting to see that empathetic, artistic, even the loquacious side of Joe. You know, I think Gabby, our producer herself, was like, I didn't expect him to be so loquacious, to have so much to say. And he really is a very thoughtful person that way.
He's a very thoughtful, poetic, caring, empathetic person. And I loved hearing those stories that I hadn't heard. I mean, Joe and I were always paired doing press because we had the same PR agent. So I was around Joe for years, even though I didn't get to do scenes with him. And I didn't know all of that behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Really interesting. And to see that through line that we're hearing from so many actors that we interview about the experience of bringing it and how it changed their life and how it was special. And looking back on it, we realize it even more.
Yeah, yeah. So again, thank you so much to Joe for coming on. We hope you all enjoyed.
Next week on Truest Blood, you may know him as Detective Elliot Stabler, but we know him as Roman Zamoyak, the 500-year-old head of the Vampire Authority, played with ruthless calm by Chris Maloney. We kind of can't believe we got him on our little podcast here, and it was so much more hilarious and also enlightening than we could have ever hoped for. So tune in next week for all the details.
Thanks for listening, Trubies. Subscribe and follow wherever you listen to your podcasts, and we'll see you next week.
Y'all come back now. You're here.
Truest Blood is produced by Safe Haven for HBO. Executive producers are Janina Gavankar, Kristen Bauer, and Deborah Ann Wool. Our producer is Gabrielle Gallon, and our audio producer is Christopher Wool. Our theme song was recorded just for this podcast by Jace Everett. Additional music was composed by Timo Chen. And remember, you can watch all of the original episodes of True Blood on Max.